Welcome back to Streets and Eats. It's been a few weeks because, hey, the holidays. What more can I say? This is episode 54, and it's going to be about southern Thailand, the things to do in Songkhla.
Welcome to Streets and Eats, the travel and food podcast dedicated to taking our listeners to the sights, sounds, and flavors of fascinating places near and far, both on and off the beaten path. We're Jim and Corinne Vale, and we've been traveling internationally and domestically together for decades, visiting more than 90 countries and all 50 states in the USA. We'll share all of the local knowledge and food expertise we've gathered through years of living as expats in Asia and Europe, as well as traveling with families spanning multiple generations around the world. Join us each week for a new adventure. Well, the holidays have been a lot of fun for us. Of course, we're here in Vietnam with our little 2-year-old grandson. I can't really call him a little 2-year-old grandson anymore.
No, he's a big 2.5-year-old grandson.
Almost 3, actually.
But it's been so much fun because that's really the reason we moved to Vietnam.
Yeah. Well, he's so much bigger than the other kids that he plays with. We're out on the playground the other day, and I mean, he's just learning to socialize and share toys, and it can be a challenge, especially with such an international group
with different cultures and customs about sharing and group play. And
so we'll be out in the playground with like the United Nations.
Yeah.
There's Ukrainians, Russians,
you name it. They're
French,
out there.
German, Swiss.
We live in District 2, which is where many foreign expats live. Now, in saying that, there's a joke around town that if you live in District 1 or District 2, you're not really in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And in some ways that can be very true. I can see where that gets its idea, but the reality is there are plenty of Vietnamese here, and
yes.
When we're out on the playground, I'm going to say it's 90% Vietnamese anyway.
Yeah, they're definitely the majority.
Yeah, so we're
it's
getting
a lot of fun, and because he's so big for his age, they assume he's like a 4-year-old. So they expect him to act like a 4-year-old. So I have to kind of say, he's only 2.5. He's big for his age. He's still learning to cooperate and share. He's getting really good, and it's a lot of fun, and it's a great way to meet the locals and the neighbors. So we love that.
Yeah, it's been really, really fun. And just the idea of spending the holidays with him in general is fun. Plus, we have this thing where we say, if we're going to go out and see something, go to a museum, whatever, we call it an adventure. So now that's his new thing. Let's go on an adventure. And as you know, Jim and I love adventures. Speaking of which,
Songkhla was an adventure that we tacked on to the end of our Phuket trip. We talked all about all the fun things to do in Phuket. Really a great place to go for adventuring and beaches, food,
island hopping.
It was a lot of fun. Songkhla was a little bit different, I thought. It had a different feel.
Well, I chose it purposefully for a couple of reasons. Number one, I'd never heard of it. That always makes me want to go there. And number two, I saw this gorgeous photo, just absolutely stunning photo of a longtail boat with some people in it and being surrounded with lotus flowers. Well, of course, that sold it for me. That's why I chose this area to go on a little excursion with. And we did it tacked on to our conference, our travel conference. So we were traveling with other travel bloggers and travel influencers. And it was really interesting. But because we were set on the time frame, we did make a few mistakes, and we'll talk about that as we go. But I'm here to tell you, Jim, what do you think? Songkhla, the hidden gem of Thailand.
Yeah. I mean, that's not really a term that I like to use a lot, but it is. I mean, it's just beautiful down there. It's close to Malaysia.
It's on the Malaysian border. So actually, we didn't see a lot of Western tourists, but we saw a lot of Malaysians
and Singaporeans
because basically they just take the train and hop across the border, and they can even do it in a long, albeit day trip, or better yet, in a weekend. And we saw plenty of people doing that. As it is, it took us about, I would say, 2.5 to 3 days to really get a good feel for the region as well.
I think that's a good amount of time to spend there.
And if you want an experience that's not what you typically think of Thailand with the beaches and the islands, I mean, you can do that too at a different part. Then I would say go to Songkhla.
Yeah.
If you're in Thailand and traveling around, really the only way to get there, I think, from Bangkok or Phuket or any of those other places that you might be, is probably to fly. It's going to be cheap, yet easy.
Yeah, and not too long of a flight.
And well, it's like 4 hours from Bangkok because it's a smaller
not
plane.
too bad though.
Yeah.
Well, so you can fly in from other points in Bangkok. You can fly in from Chiang Mai, Phuket, of course, Bangkok. You can fly in from Kuala Lumpur, and there were flights from Singapore.
Yeah, there were. And in fact, that's what people recommend, is going ahead and taking the flight is just easy. It goes into this little tiny airport, Hai Tay, I think it's called.
In Hai Tay?
And
no, Hat Yai.
I always say it wrong. That's why I said it like that.
Hat Yai.
Hat Yai.
Hat
Anyway,
Yai.
it's a cute little airport. It's got food in there. It's easy. And of course, it's quick because it's just a local airport, and it's just a ride into town. No problem.
Well, Hat Yai is actually one of the larger population centers.
It is
Thailand.
Surprisingly. It doesn't feel like it, though.
It really doesn't. It feels like a small town.
Yeah.
I guess it's got a little bit of sprawl going on.
Did it say it was fifth largest?
I think
something
I
like
wanted
that?
to say fourth largest.
No, I want to say fifth. Anyway,
Okay.
fourth or fifth.
Anyway, it's a good size. The airport is small and easy to navigate. And you can get into town. It's like, I want to say like 18 kilometers from the main city of Hat Yai.
But cheap.
Like most airports are these days. Yeah, but getting around Thailand is pretty cheap. So you can take a bus or a minivan or
a taxi. Even.
A taxi.
Or Uber.
Get into
Grab.
town, and then from there, the bus station will take you to the different points in the Songkhla area. Yeah, it's you could make Hat Yai a base, I think, but you'd be doing a lot of extra moving around, traveling around. So
I wouldn't. I would just make
I
it.
wouldn't either.
I mean, I don't see anything wrong with packing a suitcase and going to Bangkok for 2 or 3 days, going to Phuket for another 2 or 3 or 4 days, and then going to Songkhla, Hat Yai, for another 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
And you could almost make a 2-week trip out of it. And you're seeing different parts of the country, completely different things, and wonderful.
Well, and what's good about that also, if you did it in an itinerary like that, you can fly from Hat Yai to Chiang Mai and do the northern regions at the end of the trip.
Yeah.
Or go
any
the
way
opposite.
you want to, actually.
So that works really good. But I was saying use Hat Yai as a base for while you're in the region, in the Songkhla region. You could do that, but you'd be doing a lot of driving to get to some of the sites. So like the way we did it, I thought worked really good, where we kind of stayed here one night and stayed there one night and just kept moving around. We kind of did a circle around Songkhla Lake, and that worked really good.
Because that is one of the highlights, is the lake, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we arrived in Hat Yai, and then we went into Songkhla and immediately did a walking tour, because the town is so walkable, of all the cool things to see in Songkhla. And I gotta say, when I was doing that, it definitely felt more Malaysian to me than it did Thai.
Yeah.
Obviously, the food was Thai, the people are Thai, the smiles are Thai, but the dress was very Malaysian. There were mosques everywhere, call to prayer. It just gave me a very Malaysian feel.
Yeah. It had kind of a melting pot feel. Malaysia, also Chinese, because it has a lot of Chinese influence from immigration a while back, which is also where a lot of the architecture came from. It just has a really cool feel to it.
Yes, I agree. And we loved every minute of it. So let's talk about walking around town. What did we see? I mean, what is there to do in Songkhla?
Well, we started at the Old Town Gate, which again has really a strong Chinese influence in its architecture. Really a beautiful gate. It's no longer a walled city. The wall doesn't still exist, but it was at one time. Yeah. So the gate is still there. They kept that. There's another section we walked through down an alley that was another section of the wall, but really it's just houses and buildings now.
Houses and buildings and street art.
And street art.
That's one of the reasons why it reminded me of Malaysia so much, because the street art was very what you always see in pictures in Georgetown and Penang. It's very, interactive, number one.
Right.
And number two, it's just got that almost, you're walking into a wonderland, but you're right on the street. It's just kind of cool.
Really good.
They had like some of the street art was a guy on a bicycle or a person looking out a window or the coffee shop selling coffee.
Handing you the
things.
coffee cup and you can like reach out and grab it. And that's probably one of the number one photo spots.
Yeah. And of course, these will all be on the article on our blog. So you'll want to go there and check out these beautiful pictures that we have. One of the things that was so awesome, just like anywhere else in Thailand, I mean, I haven't been a place in Thailand yet that I can't say this about. The food was
incredible,
amazing. And here, what we experienced was in Songkhla. They took us to an old house, and this old, I don't know, what would you call it? A manor house or something.
Yeah. It wasn't really a mansion because it was in the city.
It was pretty big though, actually.
But it was big. So a manor house is maybe a good way of saying.
Yeah. And they had turned the house, the back of the house where people live. I think they had a private section too. They must have.
Oh yeah.
But they had a whole museum in there and then a whole room dedicated to the seventh king.
Mm-hmm.
And just really cool things. And then in the front of the house, they had a whole bakery and restaurant.
Coffee shop.
And we actually ate downstairs in the regular part of the house, but there was a whole other building where they had the bakery, and that was beautiful too. Everything was decorated just gorgeously. What was the name of that house?
That was
Bon
Duen Chai.
Bon Duen Chai.
Or Bon Duen Che. I'm not sure if we're saying
we're not
right.
sure. Obviously, we don't speak Thai or anything else, actually. And we're butchering that, hopefully. Not too badly, but we will link it so that you can go there. It was amazing.
All the food there was just excellent and beautiful.
Yeah.
Like the house itself was gorgeously decorated. So was the food. So we're talking edible flowers, amazing presentation.
And because it was a bakery, it was kind of like a fusion, some of it.
Yeah.
They had some very traditional things like, what was that egg called? They gave us this orange round thing, which was the yolk of the egg. And it was kind of like a jelly.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't taste bad. It tasted quite good, actually. I liked it. But it's not something I would have chosen to eat if they didn't actually point it out and say, you have to try this, because it just doesn't look like something that
you would
want to put in your mouth.
Well, that was one of the good things about this meal was we didn't order off the menu.
No.
They had selected the meal for us. And so they had brought out like tea trays, right?
Yeah.
Tiered tea trays that were just chock full of
tastes,
all kinds of mostly savory wraps and things like that. Rolls, egg rolls, spring rolls, fresh rolls. Fresh rolls is what they were, right?
Yeah. And they also had rice. They had everything you can imagine. Yeah. We had noodles. We had rice. We had
chicken wings.
Those
were my favorite.
They were
super spicy, really delicious.
It was all so good. I definitely could not eat enough.
No.
Anyway, so we were walking around town. We had lunch there. Also down in the town. And one of my favorite things was the street art, as I was saying. But we went to a few places that are along the route, and we'll make a little map on our blog so you can see it. But there's a Chinese house where they kind of turned it into
like a library,
almost like a library, but there weren't really books there for you to check out. It was more of a space to relax, which it's a pretty warm place. So that gave you a chance. All the windows and doors are open. And if there is a breeze, the breeze would go right through there. But you just sit there and sort of commune with other people who need to sit down. And it had photographs on the wall, and it had like this big book sort of art installation. But it was just an interesting place, and it was right along the port as well.
It was a very old traditional style, one of the oldest buildings I think in town. So yeah, really cool. When it's closed up, because I was looking at Google Maps trying to pinpoint its location, and when they did their street shot of it, it was closed. So it doesn't look like much when it's closed. It's just another old wooden building with, shuttered front. But when it's open, the whole thing opens up and it's just beautiful natural wood, brickwork in some areas. And yeah, just a great place to sit and
we talked to the few other people that were there. There was only 3 or 4 other people there, but they were all just willing to chat and have pictures taken. And
yeah, the little family in the back.
Yeah. And then cute. There was a little family in the back. That's right.
And it's right off the lake. Well, okay. So the old town is pretty small. It's definitely walkable. It's one-way streets. So we went down the main road closest to the lake, and we walked down that one, and then we came back up a little bit more inland on the other street,
which was
went
more
the opposite direction.
I would say that was more the shopping road, the main road that people walk on. So we kind of did it where we ended up on that road.
Yeah.
And that worked out really good. I think the reason we did it that way is because we went to the Ceramics Museum, which was just beautiful. I mean, you walk through there and again, it was like an old manor house and there's just the furnishings and the ceramics and everything was just so feng shui, so beautiful.
Yeah.
So calming. But there was a lot of people there, surprisingly. It was pretty crowded, yeah. But it was so nice. I mean, like I said, I think the tourists were all Singaporean and Malaysian. There were no other...
Oh, no, not Chinese, because China wasn't open yet.
It wasn't Chinese, yeah. And they were so polite and so welcoming, and they were very conscious of not being in your photos, or if you wanted them in the photos, allowing you to be in the photos. It was just really,
or taking
really,
photos
really
of
nice.
us.
Yeah, or taking photos with us. Exactly.
Which was fun.
Then we went to what they call the Red Brick Building.
The Red Rice Mill.
The Red Rice Mill. Okay, yeah. Don't ever repeat what I call things. But anyway.
Well, because it's on a lake, a very large lake, it was difficult to get rice moved around other than on the water. So farmers from around that region would bring their rice into this rice mill where they could get it milled and sell it as a cooperative type thing. Once that kind of went away,
once the need for that, because now we have cars and it's much easier,
trucks and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They had this presence of mind to keep the building. It's a beautiful old wooden building, and now it's just kind of like a venue space and a venue space,
but it also has another museum area. It has the history of Songkhla and the history of the building itself, like you were saying. It's right on the water, so you can go out back and see the boats. It's very interesting. And of course, there's a couple of food vendors in there. Ice cream, you can get ice cream, and you can just sit and again get out of the heat. When we were there, and that was the 3rd week in November.
Yeah,
it was hotter than blazes.
Yeah, I'm sure it's always hot there.
And every picture you see of me, be warned, my hair is all over the place because it does not do well with humidity. So it's hot and humid, and yeah.
Well, that was a fun space because like I said, it's a venue space. So there's a stage in one area, but it wasn't like a live band playing. It was karaoke.
At the time we were
there. And I don't know if it was like people who were singing for the crowd karaoke or just a karaoke machine up on the stage that anybody could come up and sing to.
We don't know.
Which is what it more seemed like.
But it seemed very informal.
Yeah.
And very easy and just
people were having a lot of fun.
Kind of a nice space. Yeah. It was really fun. It was definitely worth a stop on our walking tour for sure. From there, we did go around the corner and come up on, like I said, more into the main downtown area, I would say. And when you're down in the main downtown area, there's a Chinese temple or two that we went to. There's wonderful shops, plenty of food, street food, and restaurants. And I just think that we had a really good time walking down the street. I
got to take a rickshaw ride.
A little rickshaw ride.
About 3 blocks. One of the things you're going to see in the street art as you're walking through this part of town is there's a huge mural on the side of this one building that's got faces of Songkhla. People who have been in the city or maybe are important figures in the city, that sort of thing. And they're just covering this wall with all these faces and people, which is really cool. But one of them is this really old guy with a rickshaw. And our guide points it out and says, and you can still ride on that rickshaw. And I said, oh, really? Because we had seen a couple of rickshaws around the town. But mostly it's a walking town, I would say. Just
yeah,
because
you don't really need to ride a rickshaw.
It's so small and there's traffic. So walking was good. Anyway, about 20 feet from that mural, sure enough, here is this old man sitting on his rickety old bicycle rickshaw. I'm not sure which one is older, him or the bicycle. They're both ancient. And I said, okay, I'll go for a ride. Well, the ride, it was all of 2 or 3 blocks to our next stop.
It was, I don't even think it was 2 or 3 blocks. Yeah. It was short.
But it was a lot of fun and he was a great character. So that was kind of cool.
And he, it was just typical Thai. He's smiling and he's talking all in Thai and we don't know a word he's saying, or maybe it was in English. I don't know. No. Whatever it was intelligible and we couldn't really understand any of it, but it was cute. It was good. And he just was so happy to have Jim on there. I figured I'd kill the poor man if he tried to take me on his bike because he was, in his 70s?
Yeah, but he looked like he was in his 90s.
Oh, he did. But he was this little guy. And I thought, oh, gosh, nobody wants to get on that bike. I mean,
nobody wants to put him through that.
Yeah. But
that's what he wants to do.
Yeah. Anyway, Songkhla is a very cute little city.
Yeah.
And it's not going to take long to go through it. One day, really taking your time, you'll be able to do everything.
I would say a half day.
I think it's more of a half day thing, but if you want to eat there and just spend the night, I think you have time if you fly in, if you get there in the morning, and you have like all afternoon and evening, that would be plenty.
It would be a good place to stay for the night. The one place that we stopped in at the end of the walking was a boutique hotel that was a beautiful little place. It had a gorgeous garden, interesting food, coffee shop. And they did it all right there. So it was really a cool experience, I think, just to have tea there, which is what we did. But it would be
we had desserts there too.
Yeah, tea and sweets. And then, but I think it'd also be a great place to spend the night and just kind of like, I think most of those type of day tourist places, if you get the opportunity to spend the night, then you get the place to yourself and you really get to see what it's like without the tourists. And I think that's always cool.
I do too. It makes it really special, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the next day, the main reason we wanted to go to Songkhla was to get out on the lake. And so the next day we drove, how long did it?
Well, we drove from there up to the top of Songkhla.
About how long was the drive?
I wouldn't say like 3 hour, 4 hour. No,
I don't remember it being that long. Anyway, it wasn't
2.5 hours.
Maybe a couple of hours. And the first thing that you come to that sort of maybe introduces you to this part of the region is the Chaloem Phrakiat's 80th birthday bridge.
Oh, right.
Which they were so proud of this bridge.
The longest bridge in Thailand.
Yeah. And we heard about this bridge over and over again before we got there. So we were very much looking forward to seeing this bridge. I'm going to say it was long.
Yes. 5.5 kilometers.
But it's, I guess in my brain,
when they say the bridge is a destination,
you
think the bridge is the destination.
Right.
It's going to be some kind of amazing architecture, that sort of thing, right?
Right.
That's what I was thinking too.
I was envisioning this beautiful bridge in whatever way. Beautiful, like Golden Gate Bridge or Wooden Bridge or even like the bridge in Hoi An that's like Chinese, ceilings or something.
Oh, right.
No. It's a cement bridge.
No, but what is the destination there is the lake itself.
The lake and the birding area.
Yeah. So the bridge is really kind of like a causeway. I would call it more like a causeway.
I would call it a causeway too.
Yeah. There are some areas that are slightly more raised than others, and that's more bridge-like, but it's still mostly a causeway. So you're just driving on a road across swamp. Is it swampland? Marshland. Yeah, I guess that's better.
But I'm going to say it really was a destination for the locals.
Oh, yeah.
There were so many families there who went there to basically bring food and eat dinner, sitting on the bridge, watching the sunset.
Watch the sunset, look at the water buffalo, if you're lucky enough to see them down below. Usually they hang out under the bridge.
Try to spot the birds. And they have
the birding is cool.
Photos of the birds up on the bridge on the light poles so that you can see different ones that you should be searching for. It was pretty cool. we had heard about it so much that I was like so looking forward to this picturesque bridge. And I'm going to say
the bridge itself is not picturesque.
It wasn't that picturesque, but the region was picturesque.
And I think it's made to encourage people to come and just park on the side. So there's nice big pullouts, pretty much the whole length of the bridge on both sides. So you can just pull in and get out and look for birds, have your lunch.
The family in front of us, they had basically a sedan type car, and they pull over, they open their trunk, and they pull out the funniest foods. It was like hot dogs on a stick. The kids were so excited. There was like 4 kids and a mom and a dad. And it was an event. And they were, of course, you know how kids are. They're more interested in the food than they are the sunset. So they all got their hot dog on a stick and a couple of other little things. And then mom corrals them over to watch the sunset, which I'm not sure they actually watched, but they enjoyed their hot dog on a stick. It was just hilarious. I mean, it was definitely, they went there on purpose. So cultural difference, it is a destination. It just wasn't what we were expecting, but it's worth going to. All right. But it's the region, like Jim said, which is so cool. And so we got there, and we got there at sunset for the bridge, which is what they timed it perfectly. Yeah. And then we went to dinner, which, by the way, it's a marsh area, so there was plenty of mosquitoes.
Luckily, they had lots of different mosquito repellents to try, and they had the coils burning, and they didn't really bother us too much. They were there for sure.
You noticed them, but I never got bit.
But the place that we went to was it was in the same area. They call it a resort area, but it wasn't what I would think of as a resort again. It was much more, I thought, community-based, small.
It wasn't a sprawling resort, but it still had all the resort things. It had the buffet, it had the pool. You could even, I think, go on little kayaks if you wanted to. And of course, the rooms were nice. They had a swing in the rooms that looked over the water.
On the deck in the back. Yeah, that was pretty cool. The dinner, I thought was really neat. It was kind of like on a deck built on the edge of the lake. So if you were there for sunset, you'd have a spectacular view of the sunset. And then right in the water, that whole area along the edge of the lake is where they have the fishing nets set up for
Huge fishing nets.
Yeah, the gigantic square fishing nets that are on like a lever system where they dip the whole thing down in the water. And I think we got some video of that. It's pretty cool. To get the net down or up, they kind of run up this ladder, the opposite side of the net, and their weight brings the net up out of the water.
But only one person is needed
just a one-person
run
job.
This whole contraption.
And it seemed like
that is a good,
women.
How long do you think that is? It's got to be 50 feet long.
It's huge.
And height-wise, it's probably like, 20 feet high or something. Yeah. They're big.
The net itself, I think, is probably like a 30-foot square.
Maybe,
and so
I don't know.
Whole construction needs to accommodate that.
And there's plenty of these. And so like Jim said, if we'd been there we saw a little bit of it while we were there. But the next morning we saw a lot more. And the food was really, really good. Again, we had a smorgasbord of different Thai dishes, which were delicious. One of the most popular dishes was the little fish that they fried, and they were very insistent that we try it. And again, it's something that maybe Westerners wouldn't think of as their first choice of a snack.
Well, most people balk at the idea of eating an entire fish.
Yeah, they were delicious.
Even
actually.
If it's a tiny little thing.
Yeah, Jim and I got over that years ago because we lived in Japan, and one of the snack foods in Japan is dried little fishes too, which live in northern Japan where we live. They were always drying them on the side of the road and stuff. So we got over that years and years and years ago. But I thought they were delicious. And then, it's like anything else. It's like, oh, well, they're eating it. So once we tried it and we thought it was good, everybody else then tried it. And I would say all but one person really enjoyed them. And there's always going to be someone who doesn't like it. That's okay too.
And they had a lot of good food. They had a live band.
Yeah.
Cool. I would say cool-ish beer. They wanted to put ice cubes.
They always
in
want
the
to put
beer,
ice in the beer in Thailand. Yeah.
I'd rather have my beer actually slightly warm than have ice in it personally, but that's a personal choice. And they were fine not putting the ice in it or putting the ice in it if you wanted it.
Yeah. Yeah. It was good. It was a good meal. The only thing that I was ready for bed by the time it was a long day. And we were getting up at 5 a.m.
That's right. Because
the big event going down to the lake or going to this huge lake, the big event is taking the longtail boat ride in the morning.
Yeah.
Which we did. The first part of that, as the sun was rising, we were chugging, as you'll hear on the video. Chugging all the way through these fishing nets, which were mainly unmanned. I don't think it was really the high season for the fish that they catch there. But there were a few people out on the nets, and one lady, so sweet. She was there. She was just getting ready for her day, and we pull up, and she's like, oh, let me go drop my net. She goes and she drops her net and she pulls it up, and so we saw the mechanism and how it worked. And I just thought, I don't think she was paid by the company or she wasn't fishing. Looking for tips. She was just like, oh, here are some visitors. Let me show them how it works. I thought that was so sweet.
Yeah.
And we enjoyed that part of it. The sunrise was gorgeous over the lake, and of course with these haphazardly sort of almost what seemed like makeshift fish traps made out of various pieces of wood that you could just find. It made for a really...
Well, the really good ones had like aluminum ladders built into them for the part where they run up the side. But those were pretty rare.
I was going to say those were few and far between.
And I thought it was really kind of serene and calm when they turned the motor off, as we drifted through the areas. But once the engine's on, you're like, okay, that engine's running. Cluck, 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 cluck.
Yeah, and it's not. I mean, we still had a wonderful time. We were out on the water 3.5 hours, and we hadn't eaten breakfast yet, so we were starving by the time we got back. But I would say that it was definitely the highlight of our entire Thailand trip, actually. But the motors were just...
It's not serene.
They just didn't really add to the ambiance.
But you need it because things are pretty spread out. The nets in the fishing area was pretty much right there at the dock, a little bit down the river that I think flows into the lake. I'm not sure. Maybe it flowed out of the lake. Anyway, so about 100 meters from the dock to get to the lake, and it's all the fishing nets and a little bit along the lake edge. We kind of stayed that area just till the sun came up, and it was a beautiful sunrise. But then to get to like where the water buffalo are and where all the lotus flowers and the irises are, that's quite a bit of ways.
Yeah, it's
so
a long
you need
ways.
that engine. And yeah, as soon as the sun was up and we were done with that little area, on comes the engine, and we're just kind of shooting across the lake, which was also a lot of fun. And then we get to this marshy area, and lo and behold, we're back to the bridge.
Under the bridge. So we got to be on top of the bridge, and we got to be under the bridge, which is where the buffalo hang out too, probably because it adds shade and it's a little bit cooler.
So we didn't really see many buffalo first thing in the morning.
Because we were too early.
It was a little bit early. They were still penned up.
Okay, so in my mind, here's another, I guess, misconception that I had. I'm assuming that these water buffalo are either wild or... At any rate, they just live there. They're always there, right? And they sort of, I don't know why I was imagining it this way, but I assumed them to be there at all times. But as it turns out, because the boat driver took us actually to a corral, they corral the water buffalo at night.
Up on these little islands that really don't do anything but hold the water buffalo at night.
A herd of buffalo. I mean, it's like packed in water buffalo. I'm assuming they must milk them or something.
Yeah.
And then they let them out in the morning whenever they get up and get over there. And I don't know if they've milked them again or what they've done. So at 6:00 in the morning after seeing the sunrise and doing part of the thing, they weren't out.
No.
But by the time we came back around, I'm going to say 7:30, the water buffalo were out. And in fact, they were all sort of going where they wanted to go, and they were moving a lot and swimming, and they had their babies, and they were watching them, and they were making sure that they didn't get in too deep. And it was pretty neat. And unfortunately, I think that some of the boats may have gotten a little too close and scared some of the water buffalo, because there was probably 5 or 6 boats, 3 of which were with us.
Yeah.
And then some were with a few other people. And maybe, I felt that was a little bit stressful for the cows, the water buffalo. But other than that, when we kept our distance, they were beautiful, and it was fun to watch them swimming and figuring out where they wanted to go. We also saw, and this is like I mentioned earlier, a birding area, and we saw tons of different gorgeous birds.
It was the perfect time of day for it, of course.
Yeah.
So once the sun comes up, like that point where it's just coming up, the birds are the most active. They were everywhere. It was very cool.
A little too far to get any good pictures, but
yeah, of course.
But still beautiful, and you can see them with your naked eye, and that made it much more interesting.
And the other thing in that area was, of course, the
lilies,
the water lilies, and the lotus flowers.
And the lotus flowers, that's right.
So first we came across the water lilies, and this was really interesting. I'd never really been in the water with a water lily. We
never paid attention to it.
Yeah, I didn't realize that their roots were so long and intertwined. So as the boat would go through, it would like move the roots around, and some of the flowers would kind of sink slowly under the water until the boat was gone, and then they'd come back up. And as they were sinking, the flowers would close, like a self-preservation type thing. That was pretty neat. But it was really cool just to be like in the middle of this huge water lily bed with flowers all around.
Except there weren't as many flowers as we were led to believe. As it turns out, and I made sure I asked this question, of course, this was after the fact for us, but before the fact for you guys, right?
Right.
Is that the best time to go to see the water lilies in their best light, when there's tons and tons of them out, is not only early in the morning when we went there, but during the month of April, because that's when the rains, they're just perfect then. And I guess there's a lot more. We had little patches of them, and they were gorgeous. Don't get me wrong. We loved it, but there just weren't as many as I was expecting.
You see these pictures of like the whole lake covered in them. That was not
what we saw.
We would see patches here and there of good size patches, but not as widespread as we thought.
Yeah.
And same with the lotuses. I think it was not the best time of year for the lotuses either, because we only saw
a handful
of lotus flowers.
Yeah.
I think most of them were passed already.
Anyway,
but that was a lot
I would
of fun.
go in April if I were you. If you have a chance to go, if you're going to be traveling to Thailand, go down there in April and check it out, and let me see your pictures.
Yeah.
The very end of our tour, it's getting late. We're a little tired and actually perhaps ready to go back. The guide takes us on another little jaunt plumerie, we like to say, which is completely incorrect, by the way, down this almost, what would you call it? Like a water tree tunnel.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of those road tunnels where the trees come over, it was exactly like that, except that it was
a little
on the
narrow waterway.
And it was only, if it was 3 feet wide,
I felt like it was a one-way
but we did
route.
have a
boat come by,
and we just
direction.
all sort of like stopped and went really slow and
kind of like you would on a really narrow country road.
Yeah, it was beautiful. It was actually, I think, the prettiest part of the ride.
I really enjoyed that.
The sunrise was cool too. It was all cool. Don't get me wrong, but it was such a great way to end the lake ride.
Yeah.
And it was kind of funny because it was getting towards the end of when they had chartered our boats, and one of our boats didn't go down there. Right. So they got back a whole hour before we did. And they had a nice long leisurely breakfast, but they did not get to see this beautiful water tunnel.
Well, yeah. And it came out on the other end and it opened up into this beautiful like grassland field, lake marsh area that was really just beautiful and quiet. And
so in order
so
to
green.
take this, you might want to book your tour before you go down there. But that is really one of the main things that you're doing is taking the water, the longtail boat ride early in the morning. So if you get down there and you haven't booked it yet, talk with your hotel right away because you'll want to book it for the morning after you get there.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a highlight. And like I said, we were on the water, I'm going to say 3 to 3.5 hours.
Right.
And we were hungry when we were done.
Well, and the longtail boats brought us right back to a dock.
The dock of our hotel.
At the hotel.
Yeah.
So we just climbed off the boat and went right up.
Right.
We
to
threw
breakfast.
our things in the room first, but then we had breakfast. After breakfast, the other big thing that you can do in the area is to go out to the Varni, Handicraft, and Homestay area.
And let me tell you something. You really don't want to miss.
No, it was fascinating.
If you love baskets, number one, or handicrafts of any type, number two, or just seeing how things are done and a success story, it had all of those components plus more.
Yeah. And really well put together, well presented, thought out, just a gorgeous building. The handmade woven handbags is their big thing that they make. These are like designer handbags.
They're gorgeous. They're
Not,
amazing.
yeah, they're not like a little woven bag that you would pick up for grocery shopping in a little street market or something.
And even the ones that may be embroidered and you can pick up for, I don't know, $5-10 on it. I have no idea. Those have maybe some typical scenes on it. That's not what these are.
No.
These are pieces of art.
Right. Beautifully constructed.
I mean, you've just got to look at the pictures. We were blown away at what they could do with these grasses and the weaving.
And it's all done with traditional techniques.
When we say handmade, they go out and they chop
and foot made.
They chop the weeds, they dry the reeds, they
bundle
them up.
And then they like walk on them like you would walk on a barrel
to make them flat.
Soften them up.
And make them flat. That flattened them out. And then they actually just have these people that are locals who come in and work however many hours they want. And they have different jobs, whatever their talents are. But most of them, of course, they need lots of weavers.
Right.
And they just weave and weave. And one of the weavers, of course, is the mom of the family who started this business. And she was just wonderful.
Yeah.
And she was amazing. She'd been doing it in like 30 some years.
Oh yeah.
It blew my mind.
When we came,
I'm not a big shopper. So when I first heard about this, I thought, oh, this really isn't, my kind of a thing. And I eat my words. I mean, the whole event was amazing. Well worth the trip.
Well, we got to take a basket weaving class.
Yeah.
So we all sat down and we wove our own little coasters is what they ended up becoming because we didn't spend a whole lot of time doing it. But it was fun because there's a group of like 8 of us, right?
What was neat about it is...
How are you doing? How are you doing?
What was neat about it is one of the things they taught you was how to do a little bit of design in there and see what your ingenuity was. 8 people, 8 different designs.
Right.
It was, that to me was mind blowing all just by itself. Mine was one of the least attractive. Jim's was one of the more attractive, but
it didn't. I didn't really incorporate a lot of design in mine.
Yeah.
It was just neatly woven, I guess.
And then to show you the different parts of their bags and how they do them, the next part of the experience is you go and learn how to embroider on these handbags. And it comes with a handbag that...
It's a nice little handbag.
It's a nice little handbag that you would want to buy anyway.
Not one of their like high-end designer ones.
No. This is more like a beach one.
Yeah, exactly. To carry things around.
And then you could embroider anything you wanted on it. But you were going to do the embroidery, the majority of it. So we just picked letters for our daughter's names. But a lot of people did a full name or some people did small flowers. My favorite one was one person in the corner of the bag just put one daisy and it looked beautiful. It looked very stunning, actually. Really cool. And so we learned how to do the embroidery part of it too. And of course they helped us.
And they would watch and kind of see how people were doing things because we For this, we didn't get any instruction at all. You just like,
yeah, well, they showed you at the very beginning.
Sure. But when they let you loose with the needle and the yarn, you're pretty much on your own. And they would just kind of look and look over your shoulder, and some of them would shake their head or whatever. But then when you were done, they would take it and they would do the finish work for you. And so you would get it back and be like, wow, that looks pretty good.
Looks nice.
Did I do that? When in reality, they didn't undo anything. They just like tweaked it and filled in little areas just to make it look really nice for you, which I thought was pretty cool. And we didn't stay there, but it is a homestay where you can have like an experience where you're staying in these really gorgeous rooms. They have a
really gorgeous
pool.
Bungalows with a pool.
Food is provided, which it would need to be because this really is kind of
out
in the middle of nowhere. And I think you could do that in conjunction with a boat.
You'd have to check that out. We don't know for sure.
I'm not sure. It is a little bit far. You'd have to get up really early to get a sunrise.
Yeah, I think it's better to stay
closer to the lake. It was a good half hour away from the hotel that we stayed in, but in the area, so it might be doable. Something to check on. But I would stay there. It was a beautiful place. And a lot of fun. And the family that runs it has really turned it into a success story for the whole community. They get everybody involved. It's not like one person making a huge amount of money. They put a lot of the profits they get back into the center itself. Of course, it's shared with all the people that work in the area, but they also do projects for the community with a lot of it. So I thought that was really cool.
It was a beautiful place. It was definitely a success story. Like I said, didn't think I was going to like it. Ended up really, really loving it. So I think it's worth going to. I think you should plan on it. And if you like doing any crafts or anything with your hands or knowing how things are made, you're going to love it that much more.
Yeah.
The last thing we did in the Songkhla area was also one of the most fun things. And that was let's see if I can say this right. Probably won't. The Khlong.
The floating market, yeah.
It was a floating market. Now, here again, my idea of what a floating market is and what Khlong's idea of what a floating market is are two entirely different things.
When I think of a floating market, I think of like canals that are lined on both sides with like long-tail boats that are covered, and they've got one boat might be full of coconuts and one's full of bananas and different produce and different products.
Yep.
And you're just kind of cruising through these canals and shopping. That's what I thought. That's not what this floating market is.
That's not what this was. This was long-tail boats, all parked with their front of the boat sort of overhanging, almost like a curb, like a road curb, but it was the side of the river,
like
of course.
Like a promenade on the river.
Like a promenade, yeah. And there must have been, I'm going to say 50 boats.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how many, quite a few. And they all sold only one thing.
Yes.
One or two things. Some of them were like juice stands with really cool ceramic pots that you get your juice in. Some of them were chicken. Some of them were rice. There were sweet things.
Sweets.
There were savory things. And it was all food.
Yeah,
food to
all
eat
of the
right
floating
then and there.
market part was food for sure. Like street food stalls.
Street food.
But river food stalls on boats. It was pretty cool. Of course, the torrential downpour that came as we were walking through there really
put a little
really
damper
added
on
to
it.
the experience, made it difficult to enjoy the food and hard for the people selling it, of course. But clearly, that's something that they're used to dealing with. They just kind of zipped up the areas and covered it a little bit and waited for the rain to stop. And then everybody came back out, and it was pretty crowded.
And we tried a few things, but gosh, we ate so much on this trip that we were not hungry at all. And I wish I'd gone there hungry. So go to Khlong hungry because the food down on those boats, cheap. And I mean, I didn't eat a whole lot of it because like I said, we were full, but I could have.
And what we did have was amazing. It was delicious.
It was so good. And they had such different things. Like they had because it was a street food, like they had, this one lady had like these bamboo bamboo kind of pieces of wood where they had the rice and an egg in it. It was just really pretty presentations.
But there was also a market there.
Yeah, and behind it. So, like, if you walk along the promenade, that's where the boats are. But then you can go up steps to a higher ground. And there was a
covered market.
Which I think is probably there maybe all the time.
For sure. It's a permanent market structure that you could walk.
And you can get anything there, from T-shirts to
rice makers.
More food.
Clothing, of course, yeah. Shoes. A lot of people doing their shopping.
Bought a couple of T-shirts and some tie pants and stuff. And even for people who aren't shoppers, it was a great place to go, for sure. And that was kind of our, swan song. That was the last thing that we did. And if I had gone hungry, I probably would have I loved it as it was, but I would have loved it even more because I wanted to try so much more food and I just couldn't do it. But it was definitely something that you want to do when you're in the area. Songkhla, for me, definitely was a highlight of our Thailand trip.
I like your term, hidden gem.
Well, I mean, everybody's heard of Chiang Mai and Chiang Rai and of course Bangkok and and it's just, and they're all great places. I love them. Don't get me wrong, but this was even that much cooler,
unexpected and beautiful.
And there was more to there. It's a smaller area, so it's not full of things to do. I mean, you're not going to get that experience where you have, temple after temple after temple after temple to go to like you can in Chiang Mai or in Bangkok or whatever. And those are all fantastic things. But if you tag this on somewhere in your itinerary, you're going to enjoy a more pastoral, sort of natural,
a little quieter, slower, really nice and relaxing, but still wonderful experience. You could also fly into Hat Yai and I think rent a car. There's a lot of car rentals there. That is an area that I would not have any trouble driving around. We're pretty adventurous with driving, but I think that would be an area where having a rental car would make a really good little road trip around the lake and just having the time to drive yourself to the different places.
Now, we didn't do that. I agree with you. I think it's doable. But I also don't know about the connectivity and the Google Maps and stuff and how easy or how difficult that would be. But I agree that driving there, even for me, I mean, there were cars, but they weren't anything like, Bangkok traffic or Phuket traffic. So
very doable, I think.
Yeah.
For connectivity, I mean, we were using Google Fi, and we had pretty good connectivity everywhere, even though some of those places were pretty remote.
Yeah.
I think I even had connectivity on the lake as we were doing the longtail boat.
Did you?
Yeah.
Anyway, chalk this up to one of those experiences that Jim and I really, really loved. That is off the beaten path. Again, one of those terms that may be overused, but it really is.
And it's an off the beaten path hidden gem.
It is. It really is. And it was wonderful.
There's very few of those left in the world. And the terms are, I think, really overused. But sometimes it still applies. And this was one of them.
I agree. 100%. We need to come up with some new terms for those, though.
Okay.
Jim and I will brainstorm on that.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. We've got more really fun things coming up. We've done quite a bit of travel since we've been in the Asian region, and can't wait to see you until next time.
All right. Thanks for listening to this episode of Streets and Eats. If you liked what you heard, please show us some love, hit the like button, and leave us a review. Maybe even subscribe so you don't miss any future podcasts. Also, we'd love it if you joined us on our Facebook private group, Streets and Eats, where we just have an ongoing conversation about all things travel. Ciao for now.